Technically speaking, technically speaking, I ain't talking vegan when I said that I've been eating, making money on the side, but I use it for the main. I'm speaking in code when I tech talk that financial freedom. Have a seat cause you gon' wanna sit up at my table, yeah. Plugged in that it, girl, IT with the cables, yeah. Network engineering is for you, it ain't no label.
So, welcome back to another lesson in the Ultimate CCNA Prep course, where we are prepping you to take the CCNA exam. And that's obviously to increase your income. And you can increase it in 9 to 5, right? Maybe something in your job. Hold on. My internet's lagging. Oh, you can increase your income in a 9 to 5, maybe at your current job. You want to go to the IT department or just want to find a good paying job in that type of field. Or you can sell your skills. Places like Upwork, Fiverr, or just creating yourself a business. This is the place to up your tech skills and find an avenue that's for you so you can increase your income. Now, we did start section 6, automation and programmability, and we are actually in 6.3 and 6.4. Just like the previous lesson, it's not going to be too long because we want to focus on our labbing, right? And in this lesson, we're going to lab. We're actually going to get our developer tools together. So we're going to download everything, get everything set up, so we can start going in and using our developer tools for automation and programming and such. So again, we're going to just go over briefly 6.3 and 6.4. We kind of touched over it a little bit previous lesson, but we'll go a little more into detail with the software-defined networks and such. And then we'll start downloading our developer tools. Okay, let's get into it. All right, let me get this off my screen because it's always popping up. And we move it here. Okay, so we left off with SDN, right? We talked about SDN. We were going in a little bit about the Southbound interface, Northbound interface, but let's actually go into SDA, right? SDN, SDA, excuse me, they're used synonymously. SDA is software defined access, right? So SDN, it's the same thing, software-defined networking, but A is more of the access, right? That's the difference. And when you say access is users, as hosts, and devices having access into our network via software, our software-defined network, right? So again, they're used pretty loosely as the same thing. However, SDN is basically just saying that it's a controller-based network, right? It is a software-defined network that is based off of a controller, right? And that kind of describes like the network uses this controller to implement its changes in automation, right? SDA is the same thing, but more on an access layer, which again, as we know from access layer, is where our end devices and hosts come into our in our network. And it's all software defined, right? So I do want to point that out. SDA, SDN, you'll see those terms used the same way, okay? So what we're going to do is within the SDN umbrella, we'll talk about SDA and go a little bit deeper into it, right? SDA is just it's the newer land, right? The newer local area network architecture, because it's all about software defined networking, right? It's not our traditional networking, which is just regular physical switches and routers, maybe a little virtualization here, but we're going to go into every router, every networking device, switch, router, and basically, configure it or control it in some sense. So instead of doing that the traditional way, technology decided, I'm not even gonna say Cisco, decided to add software so we can use our time more manageably, and we can do things much quicker and at a less error pace because we have a computer doing it, right? Now, we talked a little bit again we left off with the SDN, and we have our controller. Now our controller is our DNA Center controller, right? DNA stands for Digital Network Architecture. Now, if you go all the way back, I believe it was section 1, we probably covered a little bit of the DNA Center controller because we talked about controllers in a network. And we brushed over a little bit with the DNA Center. And this is where we're actually going to talk a little bit more about it, which is the center focus of an SDA, right? Of the software-defined access, which is our software-defined network. All right. And this controller sits in the middle. In the middle of this controller, we have our southbound interface. And then up here, it's not pictured, but we'll have our northbound interface, right? Most of the times you'll see northbound API, you'll see southbound API, you may see something like that. Now we know that APIs are interfaces that talk from one software to the next, right? That's how two softwares can talk to each other, is through an API, right? This type of interface. So you may see it's a southbound interface, southbound API, northbound interface, northbound API. I just want you guys to really understand that the terms is kind of synonymous to each other. So you may see just SBI, or you may see as a southbound API. They're still the same thing. I don't want you to get too confused on the semantics of the words, right? SDA is what you're going to hear a lot. SDN is more like a old school term, right? It's like a legacy term. In today's network, when we are putting software into our network and using it for automation and such, we're always going to reference SDA over SDN, right? So yes, so at the center of this SDA, we have our DNA, right? This is our architecture that we're going to use, which has our southbound interface and our northbound interface, okay? Now, our southbound interface has these 3 components: the fabric, overlay, and underlay, which we'll get into. And our northbound interface is basically us. We are the ones that's going to control this controller through some type of script, right? Some type of like maybe Python or something, or maybe even a GUI, right? And we know the GUI is like a website we will go to, graphic user interface, or an application we would log into, and we would control our controller, because our controller has the intelligence. It's going to do what it's going to do, but someone has to control it, right? The computer's only going to do what you tell it to do. So who's going to be the one to tell the computer what to do, to tell the other computers what to do, right? That's where we come in at, and that's where the northbound interface is. That's what it's used for, right? So let's actually go in a little deeper about southbound interfaces and a little bit about northbound interfaces, okay? From this slide, I want you guys to understand that SDN is essentially SDA. They mean the same thing. It's a software-defined network, a software-defined access. Access obviously is specific to the access layer, right? Because this is where our end device is going to connect to, have access to our network. So we're going to more be specific when we're talking about SDA, is talking about access. However, we're always going to use SDA as the acronym when we're talking about software in our network. SDN is more like when you're getting in the field, it's more of a test acronym, right? SDN is more of something like, you want to be politically correct or proper, but we're always going to say SDA. In the centerfold of this SDA, of this SDN, something that in order for it to work properly, we have our DNA Center controller, right? Controller. And that controller has southbound and northbound interfaces, also known as southbound APIs, northbound APIs. Okay? Make sure you taking notes on that. That's important for you to understand. Okay? So let's actually go in on these interfaces. So, like I said, the southbound interface, right? Southbound interface has 3 methods, or 3 parts to it: overlay, underlay, and fabric, right? You will hear these terms go along with the southbound, what happens on the southbound interface. And again, this is the Cisco DNA Center. This is our controller, right? and our southbound and our northbound. So our southbound, let's talk about the overlay, right? Let's just talk real quick about the underlay, because the underlay is pretty simple. Underlay is just the physical part of the SDA, right? It is the actual switches, the routers, the cables, is all the physical networking equipment. Okay, this is what resides in this underlay. So you can say physical, right? It's all about the physical. Again, we have our switches, layer 3, layer 2, and our routing, right? The goal of this underlay is to, sorry, you guys. The goal of this underlay is to discover each other. So all these devices are going to discover each other and say, are you a part of this SDA network, right? Are you a part of this software-defined network? Basically, that's really it. There is a little bit more detail of it, but as far as like the exam is concerned, as far as your knowledge for this is concerned, you really just need to understand that these devices in this underlay, the focus of it is to say, do you belong in the software-defined network or not? Are you part of it? You switch, you router, are you participating in this type of network, right? And if it is part of this network, it's going to create this type of tunnel to talk to the overlay. Okay, so speaking of tunnel, the overlay has I believe it's VXLAN, VXLAN, right? Not to get be confused with virtual LAN, but a VXLAN is a virtual extensible LAN. Okay, that's what it stands for. That's what the X stands for. So let's come down here. So we got virtual extensible LAN, right? We all know what LAN is, local area network. Okay, so it's a tunnel, right? And this would be considered. Let me come here. This would be considered the VXLAN, right? VXLAN. This tunnel right here. And basically what this tunnel right here is it's saying that, okay, you want to send information. Let's just say this is our end devices, right? You want to send information through this network that we're using software with. We're going to send it through this tunnel, which kind of encapsulates it and obviously tells the frame to say, hey, we're starting to use some type of software. This is not normally what's going on. We're using something a little bit extra. Make sure you know how to route this properly, right? So in turn, it's going to be able to translate data in a software-defined way. Okay, that's what the overlay is there for, right? It creates this VX LAN, right? And this VX LAN is basically putting on a tag. It's like encapsulating it and decapsulating. So it's putting on the tag, saying, hey, this is some software stuff. Send it over. Make sure it goes here, and then the next device is going to take that tag off and say, okay, I know where to send this now. Okay, we kind of talked a little bit about the VPNs and the GREs, and that's essentially the same process. It's going through this type of tunneling, and this tunneling encapsulates the data and puts on its own special type of frame. So when the next device gets it, the next device knows how to properly route this type of data. Okay. So it's just providing some data transfer between these different types of fabrics. So going into fabric is the overlay and the underlay put together. That's all the fabric is. Combination of both physical underlay, right, and the logical view of the overlay. That's all the fabric is, right? It's just a complete solution of this virtual and physical network. Okay, so let me erase that a little bit. So this is considered our fabric, right? That whole thing is the fabric, which contains our overlay, our underlay. Our overlay is our logical sense, right? Because it's going to create this virtual extensible LAN tunnel, right? Let me just say tunnel that that provides this type of special data transfer between these fabrics, right? And the fabric is within the fabric is our underlay and our overlay, right? Different fabrics, what we have different LANs because we're talking about one LAN. We know what a LAN is, right? It's local. So obviously we're going to have more than one LAN in our environment. We may, depending on how many sites we have, how many, sites where we're managing, we can have up to like 30, 40, 50 LANs, which in turns have 30, 40, 50 LANs, right? These tunnels. So I want to talk to someone else in the company that may be in a different state, which is obviously in a different LAN, right? So basically what's going to happen is these BX LANs are going to be able to route traffic between our fabrics, between our different LANs, our virtual LANs, our software-defined LANs, okay? So when we have our controller, right, that is in our network, it's the centerfold of our software, because we want to add software into our network. So we're going to obviously have a controller, which we would use. There's other ones, but we will essentially use the Cisco DNA Center. The Cisco DNA Center has our Southbound interface that contains our overlay, underlay, and fabric. Overlay is just the logical part of how we're going to transfer this data that deals with software. Our underlay is just the physical part. The underlay is just saying, hey, are you participating in software? Are you participating in software? Okay, cool. Because they want to create this topology. They want to know who each other is. And then our fabric is just saying that the overlay and the underlay is together, right? Now, again, we're breaking this down very small, but in the midst of things, we just have our big fabric, right? That contains our overlay and underlay. Okay, that's the southbound interface. Excuse me. Then we have our northbound interface. Northbound interface, as you can see right here, all it is us as the administrators managing or controlling this DNA center, right? Yes, we have our software, we have our DNA center that's going to go ahead and control our network because it's automated. We don't have to do anything. All we have to do is tell the DNA center what to do, and it's going to take it from there. It's going to start managing and controlling from there. So how do we get into that? Well, we get into that by the northbound interface, right? You got to look at the perspective of it. If we have our central point, our controller, and the controller has a north and a south, where will we end up? Where will we access that controller? We would access it from the north interfaces, not the south interfaces, right? So we can access this DNA center by different things, right? We can access it by a GUI, right? We know what a GUI is. Our scripts, right? We can use different types of scripts. And usually a developer, they have developers here. Yes, a developer will use a script, but there's like maybe one or two people that will be in the networking department that actually know about software development, right? Obviously, with software coming into our network, we definitely need someone in the networking department to know software. So we'll have that one token guy or girl who's going to be like, oh, okay, I know both networking and software development on a small scale, maybe a bigger scale. And they're going to make sure that we are implementing our software correctly in our network. And that is why it is important for you guys, when you're going out into the world as newbies, you know both, you know networking and software, because software is in almost 90% of every single company in the world. So if you can come in and say, well, yeah, I know computer networking, and I also know software development, right? I also know how to incorporate networking and software together so we can make our jobs easier. And that sounds like someone that's going to get hired much quicker than the person who has 10, 15 years just in networking. Like, who cares? This person here knows how to innovate us, knows how to advance us. As far as this person here is with the 15 years experience, all they know is the same old same. You know, technology changes every single day. What you do today is going to be way something that you do tomorrow. It's just that advanced. It's always advancing, right? So yes, you will be in a company to where they probably haven't updated their technology within the past 2 years, right? However, they're going to have to update it sooner. Sometimes they just wait it out longer. Sometimes you'll see companies that still have some technology that was back in 2008. And it's like, whoa. But if you can be the one to come in and say, well, I see you're in this 2008 environment, let me upgrade you to something more like 2018, right? 2019 type of technology. It doesn't have to be all the way to 2021, what we have now, but something more updated to help the process easier. And then you're providing training on that. Like, you're just an overall asset to the company. And that's what I'm trying to train you guys to be, so you can go in there and really make those big bucks by something that is easy to you, but hard to them. Okay, that's why we have these the Cisco book, and I tell you which chapters to read and these little labs to do, because as they become something that you're kind of used to, right? We're not going to say that you are a network engineer, right? But with you having this information, getting exposed to it and doing it every day, you have more experience than the regular, right? You'll have more experience than you have more knowledge than the person who's been in this for 20 plus years. I'm going to tell you the truth. I've been in 2 contracts, almost 3, like the 2.5 kind of. And there are people in the industry who have been there 20 plus years, and they didn't even know the things that I knew. And I've only been in this field for a little over a year. Right. So it blows my mind to know that you've been in this position for 20 plus years, and I come in as a newbie and I have more knowledge than you.
Question.
Yes.
How do you think something like that can happen?
What do you mean?
Meaning that if you've been in the industry for so long, you should know it all, you should have seen it all, and your experience outweighs new knowledge, don't you? Because if you're doing it every day.
Not at all. Experience do not outweigh new knowledge, not whatsoever. Experience just says that you've been doing this for a long time. New knowledge says that I now know what is standard now. So what we did last year. What about what's happening tomorrow? Right?
Okay.
So what that we drive cars, what about the self-driving cars?
Mm-hmm.
You have all this experience in working in phones, but somebody come in and they're like, oh, well, I now know how to make the tablet to where you can make phone calls and be on a computer. That Nokia person, just because they've been doing it for 20 years, is not going to be better than the Galaxy 8 or the iPhone 12, right?
Right. Okay.
So that's where that money is coming from. The money is coming from the new eyes, the new knowledge, the knowledge that's like, okay, help us advance. A lot of times you're going to get complacent. You're going to be like, okay, well, I do this all day. I can configure all day, but who cares? Because someone else is going to come in and be like, well, right. Just like how automation is happening. So what that you have good customer service and you're going to make sure that the customer is right. It's only going to cost them pennies on a dollar to replace you with an automation, with an IVR, with a computer to say, hey, how can I help you? Right. So it's very important to always stay on top of your knowledge. That's why the tech field, the IT field, is so many different departments in it, and you don't want to get overwhelmed with everything. You want to know exactly like what is your realm. If your realm is computer networking, then you're going to touch these little topics. Computer networking, you're going to know a little bit of everything, right? But you're not supposed to know deep dive into everything. But maybe you say, okay, well, I want to be a software developer. Okay, cool. So now you know everything is software development, but there's pockets in that. Are you developing websites, applications? Are you developing something like an AI for machine learning? What are you doing in that software development? And then, you got security. There's different parts of security. Like it's so many different pockets that when you get into the field, and that's why I started off with this CCNA, because it's a wide range of everything. So no matter what you want to do, this is something to get your eyes open and say, okay, well, maybe I did want to be in cybersecurity, but I'm leaning more towards software development. Maybe I did want to be a coder, but maybe I actually do want to be in data networking, right? Or maybe you want to go over to voice networking. Like, again, it's so many avenues, right? So I digress. Make sure that you guys definitely understand southbound APIs, northbound APIs, aka northbound interfaces, southbound interfaces. The biggest thing is with southbound, they have these 3 extra little things going on with them. But if you understand that underlay is just the physical part trying to sync up with each other. The overlay is like a logical part to say, okay, I'm going to route traffic in a different way because we are now using software, right? And the fabric is just what it all entails, right? And it entails the overlay and the underlay, right? Pretty simple. Definitely it's in chapter 17, yes? Yes, 17, because 16 we read last lesson. So chapter 17, it tells you a little more detail into this stuff. What I suggest is definitely go in and just take your notes on what you're not, again, with the mini quiz, what you're having trouble understanding. Definitely take notes on that and then create flashcards on these different acronyms and terms so you can know exactly how to use them. And when they pop up in your reading or when someone's talking about it, or even in an interview, you can at least speak to it. You know, you don't have to be a genius in it, but you can speak to it. Oh, yes, I know about Cisco DNA Center. You know, we come in through the Northbound interface. I use a GUI myself. Sometimes I can come in with a script doing JavaScript or Python. And you can talk about, oh, well, yeah, the Cisco DNA Center. I know that the Southbound interface has the overlay and the underlay, which is going to talk with each other in the fabric, right? It's going to be combined in the fabric, right? So just speaking like that real quick, just going over it and then moving along will help you win yourself the type of pay you want, right? Let's go in a little bit. Let's just go in on the whole of it, right? Of it in the whole. So we have our control plane, right? SDN controller. So what's the SDN controller? I'm just gonna say the DNA, right? I was gonna say Cisco DNA, but we ain't gotta write it out. We know this is all Cisco stuff, right? We have our DNA and we have our southbound and our northbound, okay? So our DNA, obviously, we're going to access it from the northbound. We're going to access it. They gave an example, REST API, right? REST API is just a application program that uses HTTPS, right? Which is the secure version of the HTTP. And we're going to use that HTTPS to request and access data, right? So we can use this data to say what's going on. So that's just one way. I believe that's more of a script way, but there are apps, right? Simple apps that you can use, which has a GUI that we can get in and access our DNA, right? Our DNA is going to be something of like a web GUI. We'll go into a little bit more of that. However, from our northbound interface, we're going to use maybe this REST API to get through. And again, it's like a HTTPS is what we're going to use to get information. Okay, that's how we're going to use our API. And again, it's through certain apps, depending on the apps that your company is using. Just know that it's going to be something like a simple app that you open, right? We know what apps are: Facebook, Instagram, Zoom you can download Zoom app, so many different things, right? So we get into it and we manage our DNA and we say, DNA, this is what we're going to do with this interface, with this device, with that networking, whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. So then our DNA is going to talk to our data plane, right? Our southbound interface, right? It has our 3 things. Don't forget the 3 things down here, right? And through the Southbound API, it will use something, and they gave us an example like OpenFlow. OpenFlow is kind of like a, let me cut that off. It's something like a special type of, I'm going to say an application. It uses API, but it's like a certain type of program that you use to like take special actions, right? And in this case, in this actual example, this special action would be to talk to our data plane, whatever's in our SBI, saying this is how you're going to use OSPF, or you're going to use, we're going to use rapid spanning tree, whatever, I don't know, whatever the control plane needs to send down to the data plane to control the data. But OpenFlow is one of the ways you can use. It's other ones like NetCoff and OpenCoff or something like that. But I do know OpenFlow is a pretty wide standard. So I believe that's probably why they gave us that an example. But regardless, that's how our DNA, our control plane, is going to control our data, which is through our southbound interfaces. Okay, that's how it is in a nutshell. Again, this is software. We're talking about automating our network. So how do we automate something? Right? We have to make sure that these things can talk with each other because they're different. The DNA is different from these virtual switches and these physical switches. These physical switches is a little different from these virtual switches, right? These apps are all going to be different, right? All up here, all these apps are going to be different. But we're all using software to control it. And we need some way for these different types of software, security apps, networking apps, DNA, virtual switches, physical switches, how do they communicate with each other? Because this is new. This is, we're used to just going into the data and going into the network device and configuring it. Now it's doing something with software. So how does that work? APIs. Okay, APIs is going to talk between our different softwares so they can work together and accomplish the task at hand. But you must know the different components. And that's why we talk about DNA, MBI, SBI, and our three little bits in SBI. Okay, pretty simple, right? Now, just ending on DNA Center, just so we actually understand DNA Center, right? We know it's the controller, so it's going to sit in the middle. Now, we're looking at it from an architectural standpoint, right? This is how we're going to present it. We have our DNA Center with our Southbound, right? Which obviously entails our three things. We have our Northbound, and we're going to get in it through GUI and script, and we have our Cisco vendor app. There's an application that we can use, and we can get on it through different ways as well. This is the type of diagram you would present when you're in a meeting with other tech folks, the whole tech department maybe. You want to meet with them and let them know your plans, or maybe just your department, whatever your department is, whether it is networking or whatever. Well, in this case, it will be networking because this is how we're going to use it. This is what you're going to display in your meeting, even if the CEO is there. This is what you're going to map out. It's kind of what it's going to look like, right? In reality, right, this DNA Center looks like this in reality. When you're actually setting up the southbound and northbound interface with this DNA and telling it to use what type of controls you're going to use, right? This is what it looks like, right? It's a GUI. As you can see, it's application, DNA Center, right here. And there's things, you got the health, right? You can look at your dashboards, any issues going on, right? You want to manage some things, provision. And it's going to tell you exactly what's happening. Wireless, what's happening, wired, what's happening, client onboarding times. It'll give you even a drawing, like a topology drawing, like, that's connected to that, that's open, this is closed, that's open, probably be red, these will be green, so you can see exactly like, okay, what's going on, okay? It has a really good stuff. I think I've used Cisco DNA Center one time in one of my contracts, and I don't think I really used it. I think it was just me just looking around, just being nosy, because I've never, again, I'm new to this field, so I'm like, let me just see what y'all have going on. But and that's good to be curious and discover. So yeah, in reality, it's going to be just a GUI. All right. Now we know that it sits in the center, so we know that the main role is to act as the controller, right? That controller of this SDA, controller of this software-defined access of this network, right? And another role that it has is you can use DNA Center as a like management platform if you're not, if you don't have SDA totally implemented in your environment, right? But the purpose is for you to use the DNA Center as your management platform because you are wanting to implement SDA, right? You're wanting to implement software in your network. So you would get DNA and you would use it in your traditional network so you can use it as a management, get comfortable with it. Oh, you guys, this is what we're using now. And then later on, roll out your software, right? So if you want to use software in your network, like seriously, you're going to use the DNA. You have to, it's required, right? There's no other ways around it because that is the controller, right? So you use it as a controller in your software. You can use it as a management in your traditional network as well, right? So just because you see a DNA center in one of the companies that you'll go to, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have software implemented, right? They could just be using it as a management platform. Okay. So once again, read chapter 17. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys the Trello desktop application. This is where all of our exam prep notes will be stored. So if you have access to the exam prep notes or you're in the boot camp, this is our Trello workspace that we will come to and collaborate our knowledge and questions, comments, concerns. You will still use the Discord for your primary communication, but this is where all the material is housed. And I just want to give you just a quick little run through. Now, right now, we are doing the CCNA/Net Plus learning. So as I do the lives or I do recorded videos, I will post them here. And as you can see, we're going to start off in this board, which is called the CCNA/Net Plus. You'll start here for all notes. Now, you definitely can click on this, right? And it will give you some information like the Google Drive. That's where everything is housed in our drive if you can't find anything. This is also where I will possibly tag you to say, here, start on this board and work your way through. These right here are the exam topics. You can click on it and see it's an attachment as well as a link. All right, click out of it. You can click into this card, which is the Computer Networking 101 ebook. It's just the ebook with the computer networking all comprised in it. Not as deep as the CCNA, but it talks about it in general. So you can get a general aspect of how computer networking works. Basically, how computers talk to each other, right? You get this ebook for free. It is $25 on the website, but since you signed up for the boot camp or for the exam prep notes, you get this ebook for free here. We also have the CCNA Quizlet. So these are our flashcards or play little games with the terms. So it can help you retain this information as you go through these modules. Each module, right, as you can see, has its own list. So we have network fundamentals, network access, IP activity, moving on. Each exam topic is listed in its own video. As you can see, the lesson 1.2, lesson 1.3, 1.6 and 7, and they're all here laid out for you. And then at the end of the section, such as section 1, you will have an exam, a pop quiz, just a test exam, just to test your knowledge, see if you retain some information. If you haven't, it would be best for you to go back and review the things that confused you or you just wasn't able to retain, possibly even going back to the Quizlet. But if you are confused and the videos are not helping you, the resources are not helping you, please utilize Discord, and we'll be glad to get you caught up to speed.